I'm going to talk today about a very obscure subject that I don't think anyone has thought of in the last 5 minutes: artificial intelligence. Everyone in knowledge work is asking, what should we do about AI? Because it's undoubtedly changing the way that we work. But the most useful thing it's doing right now is shining a light on where the value of our work actually comes from. And once you see that, everything from our business model to our daily workflows looks different. So let me start here. Can you have a think tank without people? If that sounds like a wild question, I would like to displace responsibility to a colleague from within this community, Joshua Wirtz, who made this provocation during a WantComps event in 2024. And as provocations go, it was a good one because it lingered. But it didn't fully land for me until late last year when AI agent capabilities matured. AI agents aren't just helping with our work. They can ostensibly produce what we produce. The research, the drafting, the outreach. The human that used to be in every part of that process can now be absent from all of it. So, this begs the question, can we have a think tank without people? I think the answer is no, we can't have a think tank without people, but the reason might surprise you. And understanding why changes what we do next. The answer is about knowledge. So let me tell you what I've learned about knowledge. There's knowledge that exists. It's in our heads. It's expressed in documents and in data. It's also in the judgment that you've built over years of practice. So you brought that knowledge with you into this room today, your hard-won understanding of your domain, your experience, your expertise. That knowledge is real and it is valuable. And then there's knowledge that emerges from encounter. Over the course of these few days, we are going to produce knowledge that doesn't exist yet. It's in conversations, it's in disagreements, it's in the friction between your perspective and someone else's. And that knowledge will not be in anyone's head until the encounter produces it. So many of you already know this, and we've been circling around this for years in this community. Encounter between humans produces valuable knowledge. AI is what's finally forcing us to say why and to design for it. At the last OTT conference in Johannesburg, Senzi Bengu, a researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, she co-led a workshop. Chairs were in circles. There were no slides. She opened with something that I think about often. She said, all the knowledge that we need is in this room. All the knowledge that we need is in this room. At the time, it felt like permission to stop gathering evidence and just bring my practitioner knowledge into the room. But as the year wore on, I realized it was a more precise claim about knowledge itself. All the knowledge we need is in this room because it doesn't exist yet. It will be produced here in the encounter between us and not before. So where does AI fit into this picture? AI is remarkably good at working with knowledge that exists, finding it, analyzing it, synthesizing it. If you need to compare regulatory frameworks across 12 jurisdictions, or hundreds, or thousands, AI can potentially do that faster and at greater scale than our team can. But choosing which comparison matters. Deciding which evidence to bring into the room and how it should be weighed, that's already encounter work. It happens between people with stakes in the outcome. The encounter is an act of constitution. What counts as evidence gets decided here with our credibility staked on the answer. Now, AI can augment an encounter, but it cannot stand in for humans in one. The encounter changes us, and it changes the outcome. The human simply needs to be in it. And I don't mean physically in a room. I mean engaged with someone whose consequences are entangled with yours, and something needs to be decided. That can happen across a table or across a continent. It can happen in real time, or it can happen across months of working through a problem together. When it comes to emerging knowledge between humans, there's nothing for AI to surface because the encounter hasn't happened yet. Now, I want to tell you how the two kinds of knowledge are connected. The judgment you carry into this room was built by doing. The policy expert who can sense when a coalition will hold learned that by building coalitions that didn't hold. That judgment was built through encounter over years between people with real stakes. And it's part of the stock of knowledge that already exists. And it's extraordinary. But that stock needs replenishment. That judgment stays sharp because you keep having encounters. And when the encounters stop, the judgment erodes. Now, AI draws on the stock of knowledge that humans build. The part built through encounter is the part that needs replenishment. If the encounters stop happening, the stock depletes. And this gives us a design specification. When AI handles the information processing, designed deliberately for the encounters that build human judgment. Now, think about what we actually do. We bring people together who have something at stake. And your version of this looks different than mine, but I think you'll recognize the work here. At the R Street Institute, we love to bring people together who disagree. Maybe it's strange bedfellows who have fundamentally different values, but can agree on one specific outcome or problem. Or sometimes it's people who fundamentally agree on values and principles, but disagree on how to get somewhere. And let me give you an example. We built a coalition called the Civic Right. Conservative leaders working to defend democratic norms from within their own movement at a time when defending democratic norms was controversial on the right. The knowledge produced in those rooms across 24 convenings across 2 years was not just a set of policy recommendations. It was a community that could hold a position together that none of them could hold alone. The knowledge of what they could live with, what they could eventually agree on, was produced in the encounters. And that's the everyday work of producing knowledge inside of our organizations and with the people that we serve. It's a capacity that we build and sometimes neglect. We learn it by doing, and we practice it every day. The knowledge that matters most for this work is produced between people with real stakes. People who are accountable for decisions and their consequences, who face each other and come out different. And in 14 years, I cannot recall a single time that a brief alone changed a legislator's mind. What I can recall is a brief that sparked a question and a conversation and led to a change. The brief opened the door, but the encounter did the work. But a policymaker can now tell an AI agent, find me the strongest case for this position, draft the coalition letter, identify the partners. They get exactly the information that they asked for. What they don't get is the encounter that would have changed what they were asking for. They get a flat, frictionless deliverable, but they lose a workable outcome. So the question for every institution in this room is, where was friction productive, and how do we design for it? So, back to the provocation. Can you have a think tank without people? We've positioned ourselves around evidence. AI arrives and does evidence remarkably well. So if anyone can produce the evidence, then what are we for? And to be honest, who read the 200-page report? We've been arguing about this at this very conference for years. So what was working? The encounters, the decision points woven all through the white paper's production. Not the report alone, but the encounters all the way through it. At our best, think tanks create evidence-informed encounters where people with stakes work through what they can act on. AI makes the evidence base deeper and faster, and that means every encounter starts from a higher baseline. People walk into the room better equipped. But the encounter is also inside the production of the evidence itself. The questions we decide to ask, the framing that we choose, that is encounter work, and it happens long before a convening takes place. So here's the test. Imagine AI had written your last white paper overnight. Now let's assume it's good and the evidence is sound. Now ask, would the work succeed? Would it be impactful? I say no. You get a technically sound brief that nobody implements because nobody was taken along. We say the work matters because the analysis is right. But the analysis alone isn't what endures. What endures is what the process built. The analyst whose judgment was sharpened by the evidence. The staffer who built trust with our teams over 6 months. The stakeholders who, through consultation, changed the very shaping of the problem. None of those people come out of that the same. And their capacity to act together on the next challenge didn't exist before the encounter, and it wouldn't exist without it. The process forms judgment, it builds trust, and it produces knowledge that you can actually govern with. That knowledge only exists because people with stakes were in the encounter. AI can get you ahead of people, but it can't get you ahead of the need for them. The encounter isn't the overhead around the real work. The encounter is where the real work happens. That is the value, and that is why you cannot have a think tank without people. So what do we do with this? First, we make the invisible product visible, and we build demand for it. We produce value for our stakeholders that we don't currently name and capture. Our funders need to see it. The people we work with need to see it. Right now, they experience the deliverable. They don't see the encounters all around. From shaping the evidence to carrying it into the room where decisions get made, every step produced knowledge, judgment, and trust between people with stakes. And here's what makes this urgent. A think tank that uses AI to produce more papers faster looks healthier. But the encounters were embedded in the process of making those papers. If we don't identify those sites of knowledge production, those decision points where new knowledge emerges, we could lose them. And we won't notice because the paper is visible, but the rest isn't. So here's one way to start. Take your last completed project. Imagine AI had produced the final deliverable overnight. Now ask, what's missing when AI does it alone? Make that list. That list is the invisible product. Second, stop treating AI as an adoption question and start treating it as a design question. So think about a junior colleague, maybe a researcher or a comms lead. This person spends 2 years learning to do the work by being in the work, arguing about what the evidence means, figuring out how to carry it to different audiences. All of this happens in encounters. So as we integrate AI into our work, we need to ask, which encounters do we want to keep, and which ones do we need to redesign? Now, some of you will do this diagnostic and conclude that the right response is to not adopt these tools for reasons that make sense in your context. Others will find that AI creates the opportunity to redesign encounters that weren't working, to bring in voices that were never at the table, to bring new kinds of evidence to bear on questions we couldn't have even asked before. What each of us does with this will look different. And I say this as someone working through it with my own organization and finding that the design questions are the hardest, but they are the most important to get right because we are designing for our future. Which brings me back to this room. Institutions like think tanks matter because AI cannot stake its name on what information means. We can. But there's a kind of trust that institutional credibility alone cannot produce. And it's the trust between people who have worked through something hard together and come out the other side with a shared understanding of what they can live with. That trust was built in the encounter. It didn't exist before. Producing that knowledge and that trust and that judgment is a choice that we make deliberately. And that's the choice in front of every institution in this room. The most important knowledge that we'll produce this week isn't in our heads waiting to be shared. If it were, we could just stop right now and complete a survey and analyze the results, and I'm sure AI could do that quite well. Instead, the knowledge we need this week will be produced here in the encounters between us. That knowledge simply doesn't exist yet. Now, everything I've said today, I've been sense-making from the knowledge that this community has produced over years of encounter with one another. And that's why I'm confident that all the knowledge that we need is in this room. This conference is a knowledge-producing event, and this is the occasion for the first encounter. So with that, let's get started. So I'm really curious to know what resonated, what didn't, and what are you seeing from your context?